The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to those on the West Coast. Welcome to our webinar, .bank. Are you ready? The slides can be found at www.encirca.com/ICBA. I'd like to introduce you to our presenters this afternoon. First, we have Viveka Ware, Executive Vice President of ICBA, responsible for regulatory policy for the ICBA. She is also a board member of FTLD Registry. Then we have Craig Schwartz, Managing Director of FTLD Registry, managing .bank and .insurance domain registries. He is former Chief Registry Liaison with ICANN. And then John McElwain, partner of Nelson Mullins Riley & Scarborough. He focuses on intellectual property, litigation, and strategy. Voted one of the best lawyers in America from 2013 throughout 2015. He is also Vice Chair of the Internet Committee for the International Trademark Association. And finally, we have Thomas Barrett, President of Encirca, the first .bank accredited registrar, founded in 2001. Encirca is the sole registrar serving on FTLD's Security Requirements Working Group. They are also a trademark agent for the Trademark Clearinghouse. So this will be our agenda for the webinar today. We'll start off with an introduction to new GTLDs, move on to .bank policies, trademark protection, then finally we'll get to the registration process and the costs for a .bank domain name. I'd like to invite you to enter all questions into the bottom right-hand side of your GoToWebinar widget. All questions will be held until the end of the webinar, and they will be addressed. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Viveka Ware on an introduction to new GTLDs.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Thank you for your ongoing support of ICBA. Before we really launch into .bank, it's very important to give you some background concerning the launch of new generic top-level domains. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, commonly known as ICANN, decided to expand the generic top-level domains, the letters in the Internet domain name immediately after the dot, from the previous level to hundreds and possibly thousands once the multi-year expansion is complete. ICANN is a not-for-profit organization that coordinates how unique Internet addresses are assigned worldwide. ICANN requires that all new generic top-level domains offer a sunrise period during which trademark holders may pre-register names that are the same or similar to their trademarks in order to avoid cyber squatting. I'm happy to announce that the sunrise period for .bank opened on May 17th. Now, in order to participate in this sunrise period, a bank must have a trademark granted by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. This period occurs prior to the general launch of the new generic top-level domain. Registrars must be accredited by ICANN and approved by the operator of .bank and .insurance, which is FTLD Registry Services, LLC. I've already mentioned that .bank, the sunrise period for .bank opened on May 17th, and .insurance will launch later this year. You'll find more about the general availability period for .bank later during this presentation. With regard to .insurance, community banks that have insurance agencies will be interested in this new domain. So let's talk about how .bank is different from other top-level domains. .bank is owned and operated by the financial services community, which includes a coalition of banks of all sizes, insurance companies, and financial services associations from around the world. Only verified members of the global banking community are eligible to register domains. For banks, it includes charter verification with the registrant's regulator. Domains must correspond to legal names. For example, ABC Bank would not be able to register as XYZ Bank. .bank is a trusted, verified, and more secure and easily identifiable space on the internet for the global banking community and its customers. Now let's talk about the benefits of .bank. I've already briefly talked about the enhanced security. And I've mentioned that each applicant will be verified as legitimate members of the banking community before being permitted to register for .bank. .bank is going to establish a solid foundation on which a bank can securely communicate with customers, stakeholders, and regulators. The security bar is much higher for financial institutions than other companies conducting business over the internet, given their roles as trusted financial intermediaries for their customers. .bank is poised to be the recognized online platform for growth and innovation in the banking sector, and it will certainly give your customers peace of mind to know that .bank has this enhanced security. So let's talk about ICBA's role in .bank. ICBA applauds the formation of FTLD Registry, the registry operator for .bank and .insurance, and we are pleased to be a founder, investor, and endorser of FTLD Registry. We believe that it's critical to protect and serve the financial services community by creating a secure financial services channel on the internet. Additionally, we believe that it's in the best interest of the financial services industry to own, operate, and govern its own top-level domains. We're pleased to be working with NSERCA to help community banks understand and register for the soon-to-be-launched .bank. And as part of our agreement with NSERCA, community banks will be able to access a unique website with information and resources about securing and activating .bank. And of course, we're pleased to be joining NSERCA in hosting frequent webinars. Additionally, ICBA members will be able to take advantage of preferred pricing for .bank registrations. And now I'm going to turn over the program to Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Viveka, and thanks to NSERCA for hosting another webinar on .bank. As Viveka mentioned, we are currently in the sunrise period, which is when banks and other eligible organizations that have registered their federally registered trademarks in ICANN's Trademark Clearinghouse can apply for an exact match of that registration in .bank. John McElwain will get to that point in his presentation. I'd also like to mention that so far, with Sunrise being a little bit more than a week old, we've had more than 400 applications for domain names. So there is a lot of interest in the Sunrise period, and we're certainly hoping that that translates to significantly more interest during the general availability period starting in June. Next slide, please. So Viveka already talked a little bit about who FTLD Registry is, and it's important to reaffirm that we're owned by banks, insurance companies, and trade associations, including the ICBA. So we very much are geared at serving and protecting banks and your customers. We have been around for just about 4 years, and we have a number of ways that you can participate in .bank beyond simply registering a domain name, which we certainly hope that you will and that you'll use it. But we have other mechanisms for participating in how .bank and .insurance evolve, whether it's signing up to contribute to our security requirements working group, which periodically reviews the mandatory security requirements for .bank and .insurance, or whether it's signing up when we put out a call for new advisory counselors to weigh in on the policies and procedures that get developed for .bank and .insurance. And there's a variety of ways to have a voice in how these new domains launch. We are currently in the sunrise period for .bank, and as Viveka mentioned, .insurance will launch a little bit later this year. We've had a couple of key business partners. VeriSign is our technical infrastructure services provider. They are effectively the organization that makes our systems work the right way and that domains resolve to the websites that they're supposed to resolve to. Symantec is our verification agent, and they'll be the ones confirming the eligibility of banks to both participate in .bank and also for selecting the domain names that they're interested in having. And then we've got select ICANN registrars. These are the entities that are authorized by FTLD to sell .bank domains. Encirca is one of them, and I think we're up to about 18 now. Next slide, please. So there are several variables that make .bank a much different domain than any other financially oriented generic domain that's available now. The first one being strict eligibility, in that we limit who can participate and register domain names in bank. And so you can see some of those organizations or groups of organizations are listed here. Primarily, we anticipate that chartered and regulated banking institutions and savings associations will be the ones that register the most domains in .bank. We also enable banking associations, such as the ICBA, to register domains if it so chooses, or groups of banking associations, such as the International Banking Federation, whose members are other banking trade associations. Government regulators may want to participate in .bank, and we have a vehicle for them to be able to do that. And then we have industry service providers, or perhaps more commonly known to banks, their core service processors. So the entities that either help you run your websites or run your online banking platform, or perhaps provide your online bill payment service. And knowing that these service providers play a critical role in your bank's online presence, we believe it's important for them to be able to participate. Now, whether they actually choose to register domain names for themselves is up to them, but we know that they need to understand the process in order to support you adequately. And we are actively engaged with a number of the large core processors, Fiserv and First Data and Jack Henry and FIS Global and CSI. If you're working with a core processor that I didn't just name and you're interested in having them know more about us, please do have them reach out. We love to talk with them and make sure they have enough information to support you in the best way possible. Next slide, please. So we also have enhanced security. Again, this is something that Viveka alluded to in her opening remarks, including mandatory verification and re-verification of eligibility to make sure that only active and authorized banking organizations and others that qualify are permitted to have .bank domains. We also have a number of other more technical requirements, including DNSSEC, which is a technology to ensure that when your customer types in mybank.bank, that they're actually getting to the website they intended to get to and are not redirected to somewhere where they don't have an interest in being. Email authentication is a way to advertise or to share information with email service providers such as Google and Yahoo and Microsoft. It advises them about how they should treat email either originating from your organization legitimately or email that purports to come from your organization and doesn't. And by setting up email authentication, which can be either done by someone in your IT department or the other service providers that you're engaged with to provide infrastructure service. They can help you set up your email authentication record, and the value in this is to mitigate a lot of the spoofing and the phishing that really has been very problematic for the financial services sector. Strong encryption is intended to make the data that you, the communications that you have with third parties, be they your registrar or your other service providers, to protect the integrity of the data that is the source of that communication. It doesn't actually encrypt, for example, your email, but it does provide for an encrypted connection between you and the organization that you're talking to. Multi-factor authentication is something that your registrar will provide. So if you go with Encirca, it is a means to ensure that only authorized users of your organization can make changes to your registration data. And usually this is done with both a username and password plus another factor. It could be a hard or soft token that is provided via SMS text message to your smartphone. It could be something that's done by email, but it is a level of protection for you as the bank to prevent anyone from changing information associated with your domain name other than people you have authorized to do so. Prohibition of proxy and privacy registration services effectively says that the registration data associated with your domain name has to be for that of the bank. That is the person who registered the domain name, the bank organization name, the mailing address, the email address, etc. Frequently, organizations will use proxy services to effectively hide who the true owner of a domain name is. And we have, over the years and through lots of experience with law enforcement and other governmental agencies, learned that proxy and privacy services make it really hard for the good guys to catch the bad guys because the trail of ownership is really unclear. So we've said that if you're in .bank and or .insurance, that you must have real and accurate data associated with the eligible organization, or more specifically the bank. And the requirement to use .bank name servers, which Tom Barrett will get into in a little bit more detail during his session, is to ensure that the security requirements in .bank are preserved through your name server. And I'll leave the technical discussion on that item to Tom. The next slide, please. And I'm not seeing the next slide, but I think we're going to move on to the name selection policy. There we go, name selection. So we've got strict eligibility requirements on who can get in. We've got enhanced security requirements that mandate what you must do in order to use your domain name in .bank. And we've also got strict name selection policies. And Viveka gave an example in the beginning that said if you are ABC Bank, you cannot register XYZ.bank because you don't have a right to that domain. And what providing that in .bank does is ensure that domain names only land in the hands of banks that should have them. So it prevents a lot of the cyber squatting and the typo squatting and the other kind of bad activities that happen that cause harm and add risk for banks and cause confusion and or risks for bank customers. So there are two things that you need to be thinking about with regard to your domain names, and that is during the Sunrise process, which is what we're currently in right now, and John McElwain will get into this a bit more when he talks about the Trademark Clearinghouse and Sunrise process. During Sunrise, which is the phase now and through June 17th, your domain names must be an exact match of the mark that you have registered in ICANN's Trademark Clearinghouse. During general availability, which starts on June 24th, the name selection policies are a bit more relaxed, and we say your name must correspond to your trademark, your trade name, or your service mark. And we won't get to the next slide just yet, but you will see some examples of how you might structure your names. We also have a variety of names that are not available for registration now. They're called reserve names, and there are reserve names by FTLD that are noted in the third bullet at the bottom of the page, which I'll get into in a moment. There are also reserve names that are mandated by ICANN or FTLD's regulator. And at least initially for the FTLD names, which include common community names. So an example of a common community name is Citizens or Farmers or Liberty or United. And at least for now, those domains will not be available for registration. It doesn't mean that you can't structure your name to something that works for your bank. So if you are the United Bank of Texas, you might want unitedtx.bank, and that would be perfectly acceptable. So the prohibition on these common community names is strictly limited to the name that's reserved plus .bank. And those lists of names are available both on the Encirca website, but also on the FTLD website. Additionally, we've reserved a number of generic terms, such as checking.bank and savings.bank and loan.bank. And initially, we will not make these domains available. They would not be available under our name selection policy anyway, because they would not correspond to a trade name, trademark, or service mark unless your name was the checking bank. Again, we may make these domains available at some point in the future. If we do, we would let all of our registrars know. We would also publish information on our website, and that would be well in advance of when the date of these, when these would be available. So banks would have time to consider whether they want to apply for any of these types of domains. The second bullet is that domains are limited to alphanumeric characters, so you can't have an ampersand or an exclamation point or some other atypical kind of character in your domain name. And in addition to the common community and generics and the ICANN names that we've already mentioned, currently 1- and 2-letter domain names are prohibited. Again, they may be available at some point in the future, and if so, we'll let you know what the process is to apply for them. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of the corresponding rule that is available to you during the general availability period starting on June 24th. Recall that during Sunrise, which is the phase we're in now, your domain name must be an exact match of your trademark registration. During the GA session, you can structure your name in a variety of ways, and here are some examples of how you might do that. And we intended for the naming policy to be fairly lenient. However, the domain name must still correspond to your trademark, your trade name, or your service mark. And if Symantec, who is our verification agent, cannot naturally link the domain name that you're requesting to the legal name of your bank, they will follow up with you directly and ask for proof of your your right to register that domain. And before I close out, let me highlight one other key point, and it's a question we get all the time at FTLD, and that is, do I have to have a registered trademark in order to get a domain name in .bank? And the answer is no, you don't have to have a registered trademark during general availability. During Sunrise, you have to have a registered trademark. It has to be one of national registration, that is with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office here in the United States, and it must be registered in ICANN's Trademark Clearinghouse. During the general availability period, you could, for example, have a common law right to use a mark because you have used it in commerce for an extended period of time, and for us that is adequate demonstration of a right to have a domain name, and we would grant it under that provision. So with that, I will close out and pass the mic, I think, over to John McElwain.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks to ICBA and to Encirca for organizing this webinar. So as you've heard today, I'm going to speak on trademark protection. And trademark protection is going to be important in the domain name system for 3 reasons. First, it allows for registration in the Trademark Clearinghouse. Second, it impacts Sunrise registration availability and the verification of a .bank domain name application. And third, it allows a bank to protect its mark from having others use it as a domain name. But essentially what I'm going to cover today is the intersection of trademark protection with the .bank launch program, which primarily impacts the timing of a bank's ability to register a domain name. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. Here we have a nice graphic of the .bank launch phases, and I'm going to go into a little bit of some of the terminology that's on this page. So to start with, TMCH is the abbreviation for the Trademark Clearinghouse. The Trademark Clearinghouse is the entity authorized by ICANN to serve as a repository of trademark registration data. Now, the Trademark Clearinghouse is different from a national trademark office such as the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's not to be confused with that. And also one of the common questions that I get is, if I have a registered trademark, does that mean that I have recorded my trademark in the Trademark Clearinghouse? And the answer to that is no. Trademark Clearinghouse, again, is a separate filing that must be done once a trademark registration is issued by a national office, such as the United States Patent and Trademark Office. The Sunrise period is an early registration period open only to holders of trademark registrations that have recorded their trademark registration with the Trademark Clearinghouse. As you can see here, we're currently in the Sunrise period. It opened on May 17th. It will continue through June 17th. The general availability period, sometimes referred to as a land rush period, is the period of time in which any person meeting the .bank eligibility requirements can register for a domain name within .bank. The general availability period will begin 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time on June 23rd. Move to the next slide. So the Sunrise period, as I covered, again, is the early registration period available only to banks that have a trademark registration. For most banks on the call today, that's going to be a trademark registration issued by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Those banks then must have taken that registration and recorded it with the Trademark Clearinghouse. If a bank is interested in determining whether they in fact have a trademark registered, they can go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's website, which is located at www.uspto.gov. Click on the Trademark button and then click on the Search Trademarks button. And that will lead you to a page in which you can type in the mark that you're looking for or the bank's name as the owner of that trademark registration. For those banks that do have a trademark registered, there's still time to record your trademark registration in the Trademark Clearinghouse. That process is taking somewhere around 3 to 5 business days. The typical time in doing it can be as long as a month. Keep in mind that it is still open, the Sunrise period, but it is a first-come, first-served basis. So there could be somebody else who's already gotten in line. Remember that the Trademark Clearinghouse is open and .bank is open to banks who have registrations issued by any trademark office around the world and for banks anywhere, not just in the United States. You must use an accredited registrar such as Encirca, and keep in mind that verification, which is handled by Symantec, must still be passed. So just having a Trademark Clearinghouse signed mark data file is not a guarantee that verification will be passed. Lastly, it's very important, you heard Craig speak to this, the corresponding rule, such as the ability to span the dot, does not apply. Keep in mind that your Trademark Clearinghouse, the trademark that you have recorded in the Trademark Clearinghouse must be an exact match to the domain name that you're seeking to register in the Sunrise period. This is not a policy that was developed by .bank. It is a policy that ICANN has for all Sunrise period registrations. Go ahead to the next slide. So just to sum up here a bit, when should you register in the Sunrise period? It's when a bank already has a federal trademark registration and they want a .bank domain name that is an exact match of that trademark registration. When will you need to wait to the general availability? If, like many community banks, you do not have a federal trademark registration, for instance, maybe you only have a registration with the appropriate state or federal entities, or even a state trademark registration, that does not give you the ability to go into the trademark clearinghouse. You must have a federal trademark registration. Or if a bank wants a .bank domain name that is not an exact match of their trademark, then they're going to have to wait until the general availability to file. And with that, I will turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you, John. I'd like to remind everyone that a copy of these slides can be found at www.encirca.com/ICBA. A recording of this presentation will be made available on the same URL. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into your GoToWebinar widget. And now, regarding registration process and costs, I hand it over to Tom. Tom?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to Viveka and the ICBA for giving this opportunity to talk about .bank. You've heard from John and Craig about trademark issues and the policies for the registry. I'm going to get into the more nitty-gritty detail of how you go about registering a .bank domain name and what it would cost at Encirca. So to give you an idea of what the registration process looks like, it's a little different from registering a .com domain name. You do go to your preferred registrar and you put in the name you're interested in, and your registrar should tell you immediately if that name is available for registration. That's true even of .bank today. As Craig said, there's already 400 Sunrise registrations. There's a list of reserved community names, and so you should go to a registrar that can tell you immediately if the name you want is available for registration. If it is, once .bank goes live, then you can put in your credit card and reserve that name in real time. That is critical for .bank because it is first come, first served. So it doesn't matter if you have a matching .com domain name. .bank is a global extension, and a bank anywhere in the world can apply for a name that corresponds to their existing name. Once the name is reserved for you, then the verification process begins by Symantec. I'll discuss that in more detail on the next slide. Once you complete the verification process with Symantec, then the name is released from a pending status and is allocated to your bank. Now, the domain name doesn't resolve right away. That requires you to add name servers, and in fact, there is not a requirement to actually activate it right away. So you can continue to use your current website while you get your .bank domain name up and running, and you can continue to run them in parallel and in fact point one domain to the other. So let's talk about the verification process with Symantec. This occurs only after your name has been successfully submitted for registration. And so we do have questions from banks today who have gone through our pre-screening process, wondering why they haven't received a call from Symantec yet. And as we explained, that does not happen until after June 23rd. So Symantec, which is a validation agent for .bank, will do a background check on the bank, make sure that its credentials are still valid. It will verify that the names that the bank has requested are available and do correspond to rights that the bank has. It will verify the postal address, the phone number, and it will also verify that the contact that is listed on behalf of the bank is a full-time employee of the bank and is authorized to submit those names on behalf of the bank. And so it does that by calling the contact's HR executive or supervisor to confirm that the contact does work for the bank. So it's important that the bank's primary phone number is used for that verification step. Symantec is hoping this will take less than 2 days, and it's repeated every 2 years to make sure the bank stays in good standing. Next slide, please. Once you've completed the verification process, then you go through what we call the activation process. As I said earlier, you do not need to do this right away. It's strictly an optional step, but you have spent a fairly significant amount of money on this .bank domain name. They average about $1,000 a year, and so we certainly want to encourage banks to start making good use of that investment. And the easiest step to do is to redirect your .bank domain name to your existing website. There are some extra security requirements that exist that do not exist with your .com website today. One is that .bank domain names must use .bank branded name servers. What does that mean? Well, I have the example here for Reedville Savings.bank. If that's the domain name, the name servers must or could read ns1.reedvillesavings.bank, ns2.reedvillesavings.bank. So those are what we call .bank branded name servers, or what we call vanity name servers using a .bank domain name. And in this example, we're actually using the bank's own domain name for .bank to create name servers that comply with the security requirements. So we call that the activation process. And once you set up those name servers, you then add DNSSEC, you add DMARC for email security. You can also add web forwarding to your current website. You can add email forwarding if you want to start using this domain name for email as well. So let's talk a little bit about the services that Encirca provides related to .bank. We do realize this is a fairly complicated process compared to registering a .com domain name, and so we're offering, in addition to these webinars, free consultation over the phone for any bank who's interested. We will also do a pre-screening of your application to make sure that the names you're requesting are available and correspond to your existing bank name, and to make sure you understand that the contact information that will be required for both your HR executive and your immediate managing supervisor. Our pre-screening process also allows you to take your time the next few weeks before the land rush that starts on June 23rd to make sure you have all that data correct and accurate, and most importantly, we will submit it for you on June 23rd, so you don't need to be sitting at the keyboard 8 o'clock p.m. on June 23rd. Our service also includes free setup of those .bank branded name servers we talked about. It is optional. We are charging extra for that service, which I'll describe in a second, but we do want to give you a chance to try out the .bank domain name at a no obligation, no cost basis. And so that's part of our service as well. So as I mentioned, the optional service, which I'll talk about, is our activation service using our secure DNS. We also have a fallback service. This allows you to, many banks are applying for multiple domain names. They might apply one for each of their branches. They might have one for internal email versus external. But there are some banks that say we have a number one choice and we have an alternative choice that we want, but we don't want to be stuck with 2 or 3 names. We just want one. And so we're offering what we call a fallback service that allows you to specify an alternative if and only if we're unable to procure your first choice. Encirca also has brand protection services. That's really our core business, how we got started. And so there are hundreds of additional extensions that have been launched into the marketplace, for example. Many of these are finance related, such as dot mortgage or dot loans. Those are all unrestricted. They're much lower cost. And so we are offering that service to banks who are interested in protecting their brand in those other extensions, or perhaps using them for marketing and advertising purposes. So let's talk about the cost from Encirca. The retail pricing is $999 a year per domain name. As I mentioned, this includes the verification and registration fee, includes the pre-screening, includes the activation of the domain name. ICBA members are receiving a 10% discount off of that price. And so the discount coupon is shown if you want to pay by credit card on our website. That's ICBA-member-DISC. But we also offer several payment options. And so you're free to initiate the pre-screening process now, and we will send you an invoice to pay later via bank check or ACH or whatever your preference is. As long as we receive payment before June 23rd, we will make sure your position in the submission queue is maintained and submitted automatically on June 23rd. And we do provide refunds if we're not successful. And if you don't successfully complete the verification process, there is a $200 processing fee, but other than that, you will receive a refund. So in terms of so that's all you really need to get a .bank domain name registered. That's the cost. Here are some optional services that I discussed earlier. First of all, that the activation of your .bank domain name does require a special DNS service that does not apply to .com domain name today. And so we do offer a secure DNS service for .bank. As far as I know, we're the only one to have announced such a service that's compliant with .bank requirements. So it includes the .bank branded name servers using your .bank domain name. It includes the DNSSEC and DMARC requirements. And we have an additional service for email brand protection that is part of this that we're offering as well. It includes instant web forwarding to your current website. And so you'll be able to show your boss or your customers in the web browser your resolving .bank domain name fairly quickly. It also includes email forwarding if you want to start using the .bank domain name in your marketing. And it's a one-time fee that covers multiple .bank domain names as well as any other domain name you happen to own, .com, .net, .org. This one service can accommodate an unlimited number of domain names. As an incentive to have people try this out, we are waiving the setup fee, which is typically $1,000 for vanity name servers, and we are offering a 3-month free trial of the service. And so you can activate this, understand how .bank might work a long term for your business, and after 3 months decide if you want to continue that or not. The second optional service, the fallback service I discussed earlier, again has a one-time fee of $200, and this is for banks that want to specify alternative names that we submit if and only if their first choice is not available. This service really only applies during the first day of land rush when there's a first come, first serve, and you want to make sure you do get a .bank domain name that best represents your brand name. So next slide, please. We'll talk about what can you do today to maximize the success of getting the name you want. First of all, I should make the point that migrating your website to .bank is going to require perhaps the involvement of all the departments of your bank, from your IT department to your marketing department to your support department. And so it's not a casual event that takes place over a few days. So we realize that your long-range plans are going to take some time, but you do need to act quickly, even if you have not yet finalized your plans for .bank, because we are finding that a lot of banks have fairly common names, and especially if they're interested in the acronym for their name, for example, we think those will go very quickly on the first day. And so you need to determine what desired .bank names you want. You need to check to see if your names are available. As Craig said, 400 have already been registered in Sunrise, and that number is going to grow. So we do have a search at Encirca.com where you can check today anonymously at no obligation to see if the name you want is still available. We also have other tools. For example, we can tell you if there's a record in the Trademark Clearinghouse that matches the name you want. We can't do this online due to issues with security, but if you contact us, we can certainly let you know if we think another bank might be applying during Sunrise. And most importantly, if you go through the pre-screening process now, we can make sure your names are in our auto submission queue and submitted on June 23rd to make sure you get your names first. I'm going to ask Andrew if he can switch over to the live intranet, and just to give you an idea of what the ICBA microsite looks like. Again, it's at Encirca.com/ICBA. We talk about the various phases. If you scroll down, Andrew, you can see the same graphic that John showed earlier, discussing the trademark clearinghouse process, the Sunrise period, and general availability. We have our schedule here of upcoming webinars. What I'm going to ask Andrew to do is go ahead and press this button for check availability in real time. This is what we would like people to do to request a pre-screening of their .bank domain name. And we're going to put in 3 possible .bank names here. We'll start with firstbank.bank. We'll then go with citizens.bank. And then we'll choose something that I know is available, Pasumsic.bank, because I just spoke to them this morning. And I'm pretty sure they won't have a lot of competition. And so if we go ahead and do this, what we're doing here is we're going to, first thing we'll do is we'll check availability of these names. This is completely anonymous, but allows you to find out very quickly if the names you're looking for are on the reserved names list, or if they've already been registered by a trademark owner. We don't require you, for example, to create an account first to do this. This is a completely open search. But if we hit continue here, I'll give you an idea of what the form is that is required for the pre-screening. And what we're doing here is we're asking for all the same information that Symantec is going to require to do the background check and validation for .bank. And so we ask for the contact information of the person who's authorized to apply for these names. If you scroll down, we'll also ask for their HR executive, who will be asked to confirm that that contact is in fact a full-time employee of the bank and is authorized to apply for those names. And then finally, we ask for we confirm the domain name you're looking for. You can see here that we've already pre-populated with the one name that was available, and then ask you about the billing option that you prefer. You can register a .bank domain name from anywhere from 1 to 10 years. We realize, again, that you might prefer to pay through various methods other than credit card. We certainly would take your credit card here if you want. But the last option here is I'd like to pay later. And so you can initiate this pre-screening process without paying up front. We will then send you an invoice, which you then can issue a bank check for later on. So that just gives you an idea of what's involved in going through the pre-screening process. Once you fill out this form and agree to the terms, you would create an account at Encirca, and then you're done. Again, so no credit card required up front to start that process. So if we go to the final slide, that's all we have today. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Again, if you have any questions, you can email Encirca at icba@encirca.com. You also can contact John McElwain at john.mcelwain@nelsonmullins.com. We now will take any questions you might have regarding .bank if you put them into the GoToWebinar widget at the bottom of the page.
Thank you, Tom. We have a few questions. We'll jump right into them. I know that many banks have gone through great lengths to grab their various .com URL domain names. What happens to these names once they get a .bank domain name?
So this is Tom again from Encirca. Nothing happens to those names. So you're obviously you're free to hold on to those names for as long as you want. We do suggest that you do that. It'll be until you understand what your plans are, long-range plans are. You would probably want to hang on to those names. And in fact, even after you migrate to .bank, you would probably hang on to those names indefinitely as well.
Okay, thank you. And what is the motivation to maintain a .com name if they also own a .bank name in parallel?
So this is Tom again. Clearly, .com is unrestricted. Anyone in the world can register a .com and pretend to be a doctor, a dentist, or a bank. And so it certainly behooves you to hold on to those names so it doesn't fall into bad actors on the internet. It'll take some time before the banking community adopts .bank and all of its security requirements. So it'll take some time before consumers recognize that they should be banking with folks who have a .bank domain name. So clearly you want to hang on to those names for the time being.
Thank you, Tom. And this one may be for Craig. Could you discuss high level the slide about the additional security, the difference between a .bank and a .com domain name?
Sure. So with .bank, and I don't know, Andrew, maybe if you could just flip back to that enhanced security slide, that would be helpful.
Sure, just a second.
And I'll just go ahead and start. So with these additional requirements, it's conceivable that you could implement some of them now in your .com name. But what we're doing is requiring a complete set of requirements that, when implemented together, contribute to this trusted, verified, more secure environment. It's conceivable that, for example, you could do email authentication now in any of your existing domain names. The benefit with .bank, though, is you're starting from scratch. You get to build it exactly the way that best serves you and your customers. And quite frankly, trying to retrofit other domain names that you have with some or all of these security requirements, I think could be pretty complex and fairly time-consuming, and perhaps come with costs, which is not to say there are not costs associated with doing the same in .bank. I think one of the key features is the verification component, and that is for you and your peers to know that they're dealing with a legitimate financial organization or a bank, and for customers that are accessing information on your websites or getting email from you via a .bank web address, that there's enhanced trust in those interactions. So when you bundle the verification process and the trust component with the security requirements, it's a safer, more secure place to be. And it also, for example, enables you to enjoy the benefits of a more secure TLD without applying for your own branded domain. So we've seen some large financial institutions apply for their own. So whether it's .chase or .city or .barclays. So you get to participate in a safer, more secure environment without the cost of either applying for your own domain name, top-level domain, or trying to retrofit what you already have.
Great. Thank you very much, Craig. Now regarding the difference between a .com and a .bank domain name, how would users find the .bank domain name if a bank does not have the .com equivalents?
Andrew, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
So say a bank switches from .com to .bank and they delete their .com domain name. How would people be able to find their new website?
So I'll take a stab at this, and maybe Tom has some helpful thoughts too. But clearly there needs to be a lot of communication to both internal and external stakeholders. And internal stakeholders are your the employees of the bank, and perhaps the board of directors, and others. And external stakeholders are your customers and your key vendors and your partners. So this type of transition doesn't happen quickly and without a tremendous amount of education. It also could be that for a while you redirect some of your traffic until your customers get used to it. So it really depends on what the bank's strategy and timing is, and how they market it and educate it to their customers is very, very important.
And I'll just add to that, Greg. I think that clearly the bank would start using the new .bank domain name in their marketing collateral. You would also find that if most people find websites by searching them in the search engines such as Google, and there's certainly no penalty from Google if your domain name is a .bank domain name, provided that's a direct hit for what customers are searching for. And so I don't see any problem at all with banks or with customers being able to find their bank online with a .bank domain name.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Craig. Regarding the Trademark Clearinghouse, if a bank has a trademark in the Trademark Clearinghouse that does not match the desired domain name that they want to purchase for .bank, how would they go about moving forward?
So either John or I can take that. I mean, I don't mind doing the first pass. So if the domain name that you'd like to have is not an exact match of your registered trademark in the Trademark Clearinghouse, you would wait till the general availability period starts on June 24th and apply for it at that time. Seems like the most simple and straightforward answer.
Yeah, Craig, this is John. I agree with that completely.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Craig. We have a couple more questions. Should a bank complete their pre-screening order form with Encirca if they intend to apply during the sunrise period?
This is Tom. Absolutely. We've already done quite a few sunrise registrations, and we continue to process them. That would imply that you have a registered trademark, say in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. We are still helping banks take those trademarks, get them into the Trademark Clearinghouse so that they can apply before the end of sunrise.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are two separate applications, one for general availability and one for sunrise period, correct?
That is correct. So the sunrise application requires this token from the Trademark Clearinghouse called an SMD file, or signed mark data file. And so that's proof that your trademark has been accepted into the Trademark Clearinghouse. And that's the only difference between a sunrise application and a general availability in terms of pre-screening.
Great, thank you. And here's another question for you, Tom. You mentioned DNS services. Is there a place where they can find the requirements posted on our website?
Yes, so if you go to encirca.com/ICBA, which is the microsite we have for the ICBA, we actually have a new tab up there that talks about activation. And the activation tab will describe what our DNS service will do for you. We are offering that that activation free of charge with all new .bank domain names. So there's really nothing you need to do to opt in for that. We'll set you up automatically and let you know when your domain name's up and running after June 23rd.
And does Encirca provide trademark services or simply submission services to the Trademark Clearinghouse?
No, we do not do trademark filing. I would talk to John McElwain about that. It is too late to do a trademark filing for .bank, but certainly from a brand perspective, there's lots of other new top-level domains that are coming out that you might want to participate in the sunrise period for, and so I would reach out to John if you're interested in doing that.
Thank you. One final question. We have multiple banks that do not see their registrar on the approved list of FTLD registrars. Can they expect them to be approved in the future, or must they go with one of the approved registrars on the list?
So I can take that one, Tom. So we have, I believe, 18 registrars approved at this time. We are still getting requests from registrars to be added to the ability to support .bank. So it's possible it may change, but I don't think we'll see very many more than what you currently see now. So it's probably a good idea, given general availability is now less than a month away, if that's the period that is important to you or when you qualify, that you engage with the registrar soon.
Great, thank you, Craig. We have no further questions. That will conclude our webinar. If you'd like to initiate your order in the screening process, please visit encirca.com/ICBA. If you'd like to schedule a free consultation with Encirca, please email icba@encirca.com. All trademark questions can be directed towards John McElwain at john.mcelwain@nelsonmullins.com. And, we got one more question came in late. This one is about the semantic verification process. If someone would not mind, please explaining how that will work.
Sure. This is Craig. I'm happy to take that. So Semantic verifies three pieces of information: that the person requesting the domain is a full-time employee of the bank or the eligible organization, that the person requesting the domain is authorized by the bank to make domain requests on its behalf, and that the names or the name or names that the person is requesting comply with the name selection policy. Once a registration request is put through Encirca, if they're your registrar, and it's an available domain name, Encirca will send the required information off to Semantic, and Semantic will start their review. Part of that review includes calling the bank to verify the person and the authority. They are not going to call and speak to the person that requested the domain name, but rather to someone in the HR department or someone in the general counsel's office or perhaps the person's direct manager. But being responsive to that phone call from Semantic is the most important part of the verification process and has the potential to take the longest amount of time. So if you're Joe Smith working at my bank and you're requesting domain names, Joe Smith's manager and Joe Smith's HR department and Joe Smith's legal office should all be advised that Semantic is going to call and speak to one of them to verify that Joe Smith is who he says he is and is authorized to register domain names for the bank. We've seen that verification process happen in under a day, and we've seen others that are taking 4 and 5 and 6 days. So again, depending on how responsive the bank is to that phone call, we'll determine how quickly that domain name is approved.
Thank you, Craig. And that does conclude our webinar. I'd like to remind you that the slides and a recording of the webinar can be found at encirca.com/ICBA. I'd like to thank the panelists, Viveka, Craig, John, and Tom, for your time today. I'd like to thank members of the ICBA for joining us, and I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.